Okay, I am going to start this video with a little bit of notes on important things that we need to remember for inequalities. So if you are a student in my class, I am on page 20 in our Unit 4 Inequalities and Interval Notation packet. Okay, so that's page 20. So some important things that we need to remember when we're dealing with inequalities is that greater than and less than signs always get an open circle, right? And they get parentheses to close in their interval notation. And I always put glasses on my little friend here because what also gets parentheses is infinity signs, right? So another way to write that, less than, greater than, open circle, and infinity always get parentheses and open circles. And then there's this guy, the greater than, equal to, less than, equal to. He looks angry. I don't know why. But he's the guy that gets a closed in circle. So I shade this face in. And I make his mouth look like brackets because closed circles and equal to signs, brackets, right? So greater than or equal to, less than, equal to, those are closed circles, and those get brackets, okay? Also, the other thing that's extremely important to remember is that when you multiply or divide by any negative number, you must flip your inequality sign. Okay, so the reason for that is when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you're moving the negative from one side of the inequality to the other side of the inequality. So you have to flip the inequality sign. And I like to remember that because everybody knows that Mrs. Long does not like negativity. It makes me flip out. So when you divide or multiply by a negative, make sure that you flip your sign. So we'll do a little practice with that. Solving inequalities. Now in the past, I have said to you, always move the smaller variable first. Well, that's with equations. When we're dealing with inequalities, we want to always try to get our variable on the left. So I'm still going to draw railroad tracks. That's the norm. But this time, instead of moving 6x over, I want to keep it on the left, so I'm going to move the 8x over. It's a positive 8x, so the opposite would be to subtract 8x from both sides. And remember, when you're taking away a variable, you take it away from the other variable on the other side. Okay, I'll draw myself a little line and do some math. If you don't use it, you bring it down. So I have a plus 10. Bring down the same sign, greater than. And 6x minus 8x is negative 2x. Use the calculator if you're not sure. Okay, and now my variable is on the left, and I have to start moving things to the right. So the opposite of plus 2 is minus 2. That's the inverse operation. That'll cancel on this side. I have negative 2x greater than 8. And then my last step, I can multiply by negative 1/2, or I can be lazy like I feel like being and just divide negative 2 on both sides. Now this brings me to my rule. I am dividing by a negative number. So I have to flip my inequality sign. So instead of greater than, it's now going to say less than. So I have x less than 8 divided by negative 2 is negative 4. Now notice my negative went from this side to this side. So that's why we changed the sign. Okay? So now at negative 4, I'm going to graph this. So I have to go to negative 4 and put a circle. Please note that it's less than. There's no equal to sign, so my circle stays open. This arrow on my inequality is pointing to the left, so my arrow on my graph should also go to the left. Okay, so now when we're doing interval notation, we always start from furthest left and go to the right. So the furthest left that it's going, we're not really sure. It's an arrow. It's pointing all the way out to the left. Well, the furthest left that we could possibly go is negative infinity. And infinities always get parentheses. So I close that side with a parenthesis. And the furthest right that our graph goes is to -4. That's an open circle, so that's also going to get a parenthesis. Now remember, your closures on your interval notation do not have to match. The numbers are their own entities and they get their own closures. So sometimes you might have a bracket and a parenthesis, sometimes you might have both brackets, sometimes you might have both parentheses. They don't have to be the same. Okay, moving on to another example. Over here, hold on, the sun is bothering me. And the blinds aren't working. There we go. That wasn't even the right one. There we go. Pardon the interruption. Sorry to waste your time. Moving on. Solving number 1. I want to get my variable to the left, so I'm going to move the 2w over to the left side. It's a positive 2w, so the inverse would be to take away 2w. That'll cancel it on the right. I didn't use 6, so I bring it down. And 4w minus 2w is 2w greater than 6. And we can multiply by 1/2, or I can simply divide by 2 because I'm being lazy. And I get w greater than 3. Now notice I don't flip my sign because I did not divide by a negative number. This number was positive, so my sign stays the same. W greater than 3, that means I'm going to put a circle on 3. There's no equal to sign here, so I keep it open. And my inequality arrow is pointing to the right. So I'm going to make my graph go to the right. Okay, and for my interval notation, the furthest left is 3. That's where it begins. It has an open circle, so I have a parenthesis. And it's going off to infinity and beyond, Buzz Lightyear, positive. And infinity is nice and swirly. They always get a nice round bracket to match it. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to do one that's a little bit harder. So I will take a look here at number 8. Draw me some parentheses. Now you might want to jump and move 15e because it's smaller than 20, but when we're doing inequalities, we want our variable on the left. So instead, I'm going to move that 20e. Use a calculator if you struggle with negatives. 12 comes down because we don't use it. My sign stays the same. 15 minus 20 is negative 5e, and minus 3 comes down. Now we're just going on and solving as if it was a regular equation. Add 3 to both sides, cancels here, negative 5e less than equal to 15. And your last step, you can divide by negative 5, or you can multiply by negative 1/5, whichever way you prefer. But keep in mind that this time we are dividing by a negative, so this sign has to change. E is greater than or equal to negative 3. So I put a circle on negative 3. I note that there is an equal to sign here, so I must fill equal. My inequality is pointing to the right. If that was an arrowhead, it would be going this way. So does my graph. And my interval notation, it starts at negative 3. It's a closed-in circle, so I need a bracket. And it goes off to infinity, which is nice and swirly, always gets a parenthesis. Okay, and there's one more I want to do with you, and that's going to be number 6. Over here, I will draw my railroad tracks. I will move my variable to the left by taking away 3d. And that leaves me with 3d less than negative 18. Make sure you bring down the sign in front of the number. And my last step will be divide by 3. Now, the reason why I wanted to do this one with you is because a lot of times people think they have to flip the sign because there's a negative here. But the negative was already on this side. We're not dividing by a negative, therefore we don't have to flip the sign. It stays the same. So D is less than -6. I make my circle, keep it open, draw my arrow. And my interval notation will show that it starts at -infinity. Nobody knows where that is. It gets a parenthesis, and the reason why is because infinity is not an actual value, so it cannot be included. And remember, brackets show that the number is included. Parentheses show that that number is not included. Okay, and it stops at -6. -6, open circle. That means we can't use -6 for our solution. It's not included. It gets a parenthesis. All right, and that is that. So for homework, you are going to finish pages 20 and 21. So I hope you were listening. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach us. TTYL.